You know, our industry voluntarily and temporarily canceled the cruises even before there was a CDC no sail order that came out the first time. And we originally had took a pause in cruising through middle of April or so. And since then, a number of us have already extended it. And the CDC updated their no sail order, which was the earliest of three things, one of which included a 100-day postponement on sailing. So we'll see how all that plays out. It could break earlier. We'll just have to wait and see. But the number one priority for us is to be in compliance. We sail globally. There's lots of jurisdictions that are looking at social gathering. And when social gathering is acceptable again and people feel that the risk is manageable, then we can look seriously at cruising again.
Do you think, Arnold, though, that cruising will be... good afternoon, by the way, and thank you for joining us.
Good to be with you.
That cruising will be perhaps one of the last, if not the last thing, to be permitted and widely embraced again? I mean, we're not just talking about small gatherings and crucial services like going back to school. This is something that's probably quite far on the list, low on the list of being permitted again.
Well, again, as I said, we temporarily paused, before restaurants, before stadiums, before everybody. And so you're right, cruise is by definition a social gathering. Whether it'll be the last and all that, we'll have to see. We do have historically had, higher standards and health protocols and so on than most venues for social gathering. We, often require medical records. We have temperature scanning. We have doctors on board. We've had a lot of the protocols that are now seen as advisable in place on cruise ship for a long time, with hand sanitizers everywhere, washing hands and deep cleaning of the ship. So those protocols have been in place for a long time, and obviously at the early beginning of the virus transmission, we elevated those standards in line with WHO and CDC and other guidelines. So we'll just have to see, where the world moves on this. The epidemiology is still being discovered and aligned around, and what kind of testing, if testing helps, what kind of testing, all that, and then we'll obviously be in total compliance with whatever the particular jurisdictions are requiring in order for people to feel comfortable cruising again.
Arnold, you guys have been through health crises before, the noroviruses and others. How different is this one? I mean, the whole world was glued to that Diamond Princess in early February that was quarantined in Japan, and the whole world sort of felt that hellish nightmare that people must have felt when they were on there that has now claimed the lives of 10 people.
Yeah, look, I think the way the world has reacted to this one obviously is appropriate, but it's truly global. You mentioned norovirus, which is persistent and out there all the time. It's actually much more difficult to kill on inanimate surfaces, for example, than coronavirus or COVID-19 is. But we manage that and manage it effectively as an industry. But obviously, we've gone through Ebola, Zika, MERS, SARS. The industry, because we're global, we have to deal with this stuff all the time. The difference with this one is community spread has been global. You're at home right now, Sarah, and so it's very different. The world has, and literally in many cases, shut down in very, any type of social gathering. And so we're just a part of that with the rest of travel and tourism. And, it's been devastating temporarily, but the long-term future will be great as long as we all stand together and we cooperate with each other and work to get this thing under control.
I guess what's also different is just how much of a PR nightmare that this has really been. I mean, it's been a number of your ships, Arnold, that have been susceptible in the headlines. And I just wonder how you're going to be able to convince the public that you're not an incubator of infectious diseases forever.
Well, to be honest with you, as I said, we've dealt with lots of various virus and other disease scares around the world. As we reported in our offering memorandum, as we sought to get additional cash to make certain we had the liquidity to withstand an extended pause. We've had substantial bookings for 21 are strong. There are a lot of people who understand cruise. They cruise a lot. They know what's in place there, and they know when it comes to social gathering, as long as there's social gathering, that in many cases that they're far less risk in a cruise environment than they would be in other environments. Now, with the particular epidemiology of this particular virus, we have to let that evolve and let the experts tell us, the medical experts, around the world, what's the best way to ensure that we honor our highest responsibility and our top priorities, which are compliance, environmental protection, and the health, safety, and well-being of guests, of the people and the places we go to, and of course our crew.
But Arnold, I guess that's the point I think Sarah was getting at. We don't mean to labor it, but
okay.
A vaccine's not going to be here for 18 months. So this, the epidemiology of this type of virus will be around for you to deal with for 18 months. The CDC, two phrases I pulled off their website today: cruise ships markedly increase the risk and impact of COVID-19 disease outbreak. They also said cruise passengers are at increased risk of person-to-person spread of infectious diseases, including COVID-19. So, I mean, this is a game changer, is it not? I mean, why are people going to want to get on a cruise ship until there's a vaccine?
I would say that why would people go into a subway station? Why would they go into an airport terminal?
Why would they go into
a restaurant? Why would they go into and if they don't, then they wouldn't be cruising either. That's what I'm saying is when we feel as a society that social gathering there's acceptable risk in social gathering. If social gathering is not happening, then cruise is not happening, because we absolutely
But do you accept, so you accept what the CDC says there?
I accept that we need to examine the epidemiology carefully. And then we need to, as it evolves and we learn a lot more about it, the CDC and others, and then we just need to do the right thing to protect, the health and safety and well-being of everyone, the guests, the places we go, and the crew. And we feel we have lots of protocols in place. We've dealt with other diseases and viruses. This one could be different. And so we need to take a hard look at it and then together, and we're always going to be in compliance, but together come up with what the right thing to do is. What I can tell you is that we have really high standards on cruise ships in dealing with any kind of health risk. As I said, you don't go to too many places where you have a medical record, where there is temperature scanning. There's lots of deep cleaning going on, often and all the time. You mentioned norovirus. The occurrence of norovirus on cruise ships, I've seen the data that suggests is 0.007%. The occurrence of norovirus in land-based activities is almost 6%. And so it's greatly reduced because we take enormous actions to ensure that we minimize or contain once it's identified. And that's the history of the cruise industry, and we'll deal with this one in the appropriate way, once, there's clarity around it. Right now, there's debates on testing. Does testing help or doesn't help? There's debates on everything. And as that evolves, and whenever society is ready, then we'll be ready. And eventually, we will be. So we're not predicting when. We're just saying we'll be ready. Yes.
I know how much you put safety as a top priority. I've read your website in detail today, the last couple of shareholders' letters, what you're saying to us now, and I totally believe every word of it.
Thank you.
And I also know that there's not a magic wand that anybody, whether it's a CEO or a leader of a government, could have waved to solve this crisis from day one. That said, I wonder if you have any regrets, Arnold, looking back on some of the ways this has been handled with the benefit of hindsight, given what we learned about the Diamond Princess that Sarah mentioned, which was back in January, that had over 700 cases at least and over 10 deaths at least, from what we know. The Ruby Princess still went to sea 5.5 weeks later. On I think it was 8th of March, it left its dock. And that had at least 600 cases and at least 12 deaths that we know of. With hindsight, do you regret letting that ship go to sea?
Now, I would tell you this, that you make the decisions with information you have at the time. You could say the same thing with any city. Once you saw a certain number of deaths, do you regret not closing your restaurants sooner? Do you regret not shutting, restricting air travel sooner? Do you regret, et cetera? So if you know everything today, we're at stay at home and shelter in place. And if we had known that information at that time, that that was the best way to deal with this, then clearly we would have done that, because as I said, we volunteered to pause. We were not forced to pause, because once we made an assessment and saw the dynamics, that not just us, but the industry did.
But you don't think the Diamond Princess experience in January did give you special early insight?
You have to remember that the Diamond Princess occurred just like for the rest of the world. Why didn't China give the rest of the world insight on how to prevent
that's a fair point.
the spread?
That's a fair point.
And so the point is, it was Hong Kong based at the time, came on. The ship was not a normal cruise. They held the ship for weeks longer than the cruise would have occurred, with people quarantined on board. People weren't sure at the time whether it was a super spreader, and that all of those people had actually had the disease or the virus transmitted before they were on board, or whether it was actually transmitting on board. There's still debate around that if you talk to the Japanese Ministry of Health. So there's a lot of unknowns in all of that. And so you could go to any point with anybody and say, well, you saw this, why didn't you do that? The reality is, we take the information at hand. We are in compliance. We listen to the medical experts around the world. No medical experts at that time were saying you shouldn't cruise or anything like that. And then once we got to a point where we could see, that it was not going to be, even if we weren't transmitting on the ship, that you could risk having people be extended on the cruise well beyond the time they were on, because of the protocols that were being put in place. That if there was something identified, not necessarily even COVID positive, but a risk of COVID positive even, that the ship could be delayed, et cetera. So we all decided to pause, and we stand with everyone on this. We all want to get through this together, and together we will. And in the future, is going to be travel is going to return, and travel and leisure, and when it does, we'll return with it. Social gathering at some point will return, and when it does, people will want to cruise. And as I said, we have lots of people booking now for 21, some even for 20 still, and we'll have to see exactly how this evolves.
So in the meantime, Arnold, you were left out of the $2 trillion relief package that Congress passed because you're not incorporated in the United States. Is that fair? And do you need to be considered in the next phase that they're talking about right now of relief for businesses?
Here's the reality. The travel and tourism industry, as you guys know, has been destroyed almost by the virus and the reaction to it. For us, the way we look at it is we have 150,000 employees, that are dependent, on this business. But beyond that, there are millions of people who are dependent on the cruise industry, from baggage handlers to small shop owners to Uber drivers, to local restaurants, and on and on and on. And so, one job on a cruise ship is about 5 to 7 jobs in the rest of the economy. And so with that, in that
So are you making
context,
the case that they should?
I'm making the case that we should focus, for example, the Alaskan season. There are a number of people in Alaska who are totally dependent on tourism, for their livelihood. So we want to make certain the money gets to them, okay? And we would hope that there would be ways that we can get support if we need it as time goes by, so that we can help continue to support those people and their families and create the jobs necessary. But in the end, we have found a way to secure financing. It was costly, it was expensive, but our job is to make sure the company can survive. Even if there's an extended pause, a really long pause, we want to make sure when we come out of this, the company is here to participate. We did it in the best way possible to protect existing shareholders' value to the best degree we could. And we feel we're positioned, and we're doing the things internally in terms of cash management and capital management to ensure that we can withstand a long run, the worst case scenario, so that the company is still around and healthy enough to be able to participate when travel is once again socially acceptable.
As you said, Arnold, you tapped various liquidity measures quite impressively, regardless of the price in recent weeks and months. How long does that cover you for, as things stand?
Well, we're going to work really hard, as we pointed out there, that we definitely think we can get through, the end of the year with that, with no revenues coming in through the end of the year. We're not saying that's going to happen, but we want to be prepared for the worst case. And we're going to be working very hard seeking additional liquidity options. While the U.S. May not have us in a stimulus package, we are a global business. There's opportunities in Germany and the UK and Italy and other places, for us to secure additional liquidity at, attractive enough for our shareholders that we can afford to do it and sustain it over time. So we're going to increase our liquidity, and we're going to manage internally, with the pause to ensure that we have a nice long runway if we need it. We're hopeful with the rest of the world that won't be needed, but if it is, we'll be prepared.
Want to highlight a sliver of good news here, Arnold, and that is, are you really able to transform any of these cruise ships into hospitals or places that can help out in the fight against COVID-19? Are they safe? Is the air quality safe to do this?
Oh, the air quality is absolutely safe. If you look at, first of all, the answer is yes, we've made that offer, and we made it some time ago. We have a number of people around the world examining it as an option. You have to keep in mind a lot of hotels are shut down right now too, though. And so there's also probably land-based options, but we're happy to do it. We've made the offer. We've had a number of inquiries. One thing that does appear to be known about the virus is that the science I've heard and what I've seen from CDC and others, is that it does not transmit well through HVAC systems. That is not a source of spread, is what I've read and what I've seen from CDC. So when you mention the air quality and stuff, the HVAC systems tend not to be a contributor to spread, is what the science currently says about the virus.
Arnold Donald, thank you so much for joining us. Tough time for your company and industry. We appreciate you coming on to discuss it with us.
Thank you. Tough time, but we look forward to sooner rather than later, but whenever it's appropriate, to get both you, Wilf, and you, Sarah, on a cruise again. Okay.